Hello and welcome back to the course. So in the last two sessions we learned already about the data types integers and floats, and in this session we want to repeat and deepen our understanding of those two data types. So first of all we assign variables to, let's say, 5. So we assign the variable a to 5 and we assign b to the integer 2, and we check the data types of a and b. So I would expect that a and b are integers. Yeah, that's true. Here you can see integer, integer. And what we already learned, I mean, integer or floats, that's both ordinary numbers where we can apply mathematical operations like addition. So we can add a plus b, we can add b plus a, so no surprise, we get 7 in both operations. We can subtract, so a minus b is 3. We can also create negative numbers. B minus a gives us minus 3. And also we can multiply two integers and get 10. And what we also already learned is that by dividing integers we get a float object. So if we divide a divided by b, so 5 divided by 2, we get 2.5, and we assign 2.5 to the variable c. So c is 2.5, and the data type of c is a float object. And that's actually the difference between an integer and a float. An integer is a number that can be written without fractional component. So 5 or 2 both don't have any decimal. And in contrast, a float object has decimals. So if you can see here, c has one decimal, 0.5. At this point, I want to highlight that different data types have different functionality, and all data types have so-called built-in methods or attributes. So actually at this point I don't want to go into detail of object-oriented programming, but I want to show you the practical use of so-called methods and attributes. So let's have a look at the float object c, and we can call the method as integer ratio by pressing c dot and then as integer ratio. And if we execute the cell here, we can see that c as an integer ratio is 5 divided by 2. So this is called a method because Python internally calculates something based on our object 2.5. So it returns the integer ratio 5 divided by 2. And we can also browse or search for built-in methods or attributes by just, let's take the float c dot and then press tab. And there we can see what Python offers us. So we have the method as integer ratio, and we have quite a few methods and attributes here. So for instance, we can call the method as integer and execute it. Okay, so now Python is checking if c as a float is an integer, and obviously it's not an integer, so it returns false. So and if we go to our variable b, so b stands for 2, so b is an integer, and there we can call the attribute denominator and numerator. So actually it's quite, I mean, that's not too much more information here. So 2 is made of the numerator 2 divided by 1, so that's not too much helpful actually. And we can also check here what other methods or attributes we have by pressing the tab key. Bit length, conjugate. It's not too interesting for us now, so I think we should go on. And let's calculate 11 divided by 3 and assign it to the variable d. Gives us 3.666. And if we call now the method as integer ratio, we get quite yeah, it doesn't give us what we expected, 11 and 3, because the float is here by default rounded after, well, I don't know, the 10th digit. So yeah, I mean, doesn't help too much here, the two numbers, but nice to know actually. And yeah, what we can also do, we can call a function on an object like D, so a function like round. So we can round our float object, and let's press Shift Tab to see, okay, we can round a number, so it's D, it stands for a float, and we can also determine the number of digits. So if we take here 1, so we can round our float object here to 1 digit, and we get 3.7. So if we change it here to 2, we get 3.67. Obviously with integers, rounding doesn't make really sense, because yeah, an integer doesn't have any digits. So, and what we can also do, we can transform our float into an integer by calling the function int. So int, and then in brackets D, gives us the corresponding integer to the float D. And what Python actually does, it just cuts here all digits. So yeah, it's not rounding. If it would round, so we would get 4, but it's just cutting here after the 3, and we get the integer 3. And we can also transform an integer, A stands for 5, into a float, and gives us 5.0. And there are two ways to transform an integer into a float. So either we call the function float, or so let's check first of all the type of 5 should be an integer. And if we just press 5.0, Python recognizes 5.0 as a float. And even we don't have to press 0, so only 5 point nothing gives us a float. So Python treats this as a float. And also here there are two ways to transform an integer into a string. So either by setting or putting 5 into quotation marks, or by calling the str function. So by calling str, our 5 will be transformed into a string. Alright, so that's the same as here. Yeah, that's it for now at this point. So there's not much more to say about integers and floats. And yeah, in the next session we will have a deeper look into string objects. So hope you enjoyed it, and hope to see you in the next session. Bye.